And it is 6:39. Apologize for starting a little late this evening, but thank you again, everyone that is joining us through Zoom and everyone that has joined us in person today. So we will start with a moment of silence, and if we want to take a moment and just think about our country and our state and our city and our world that's experiencing this huge hike again in COVID numbers and the Delta variants, and just take a moment to think about those who are struggling with it today and this evening, and just hoping that they get through another day. Okay, and for all those who are able, please stand. We'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and just looking at the agenda that we have for this evening, have there been any revisions or changes made? None? All right, and then the minutes for our last meeting, any changes or discussion on that? All right, so would you approve the minutes the way that they are? All approved? Aye? Aye. Okay, thank you. So we will get into my favorite time of the evening, the spotlight. Dr. Furman?
Hi, well, welcome everyone. And our spotlight this month is Talley Street Upper Elementary. We're going to welcome Principal Billy Heaton. Thank you, Billy.
Good evening.
Good evening. Oh, I want one of those masks.
First time presenting in a mask. Thank you for having me. I'm Billy Heaton. I'm the principal of the street. I'm here tonight to talk about our school improvement and things that we're doing around equity. Since we are at the beginning of the year, this is mainly going to be a looking back to what we've done over the 2 years that Tally's been in existence, and then what we are planning to do for this upcoming school year. As you know, we've struggled a little bit with consistency because Tally opened in August of 2019, and we still haven't had a school year where we started in March and we were able to finish up in May. But even so, I feel like that we've been able to do some really good work at Tally and have done a lot of great things. So one of the things that we're doing this year, we're finishing up our book study on How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ivor and Kendi. We started that last year virtually with the faculty and staff. We didn't quite finish because we took our time and we had some great conversations using the Courageous Conversations protocol. That's lots of really good conversations. As soon as we finish this book, we're going to be moving on to, we want to do more than to survive by paternal love. So we're really excited about that as well. So we should be finishing that or starting that in a couple of months. Some things that we've done that we feel really important is collaborating with our PTO. We have an amazing diversity and inclusion committee at Tally. We started in August of 2019. Actually, it was in September, but they had a wonderful welcome back fall social for Tally. It was our first big event. It was tremendous. We had bands and kids were there running around. It was wonderful. That year, they also did a Peace and Pie event where we had different members of our community coming around and having conversations, getting to know each other, and having specific conversations around equity and the Decatur community. In February of 2020, we had our Wax Museum during Black History Month, which was probably one of the best events that I had ever been as a principal. A lot of conversations that we're having as a nation, and especially here in Decatur, around critical race theory and the 1619 Project. This Wax Museum night really brought that home to me because as a white male who grew up in Smyrna, Georgia, who attended the University of Georgia as a history major for my bachelor's degree, I was stunned the night that I walked around Talley Street at the Wax Museum, and there were so many historical figures that I had not that I did not know.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty embarrassing as a principal, but also pretty embarrassing as a, nothing against UGA, but obviously as a history major, there were a lot of historical events. So I'm looking forward to those conversations, and I do believe it's important conversations that we need to have. We continued the Wax Museum last year. We did it virtually, and it still was a great success. That 2020 PTO also had a Black History Month that night, and then 2 or 3 weeks later is when we shut down. So that was the most that we had done during that time. Last year, the most important work I feel like that we undertook was a year-long study around the myths of racism and beyond. Charlie Cobb and Elliot Robertson facilitated this year-long study. So we had Tally staff and Tally parents come together once a month to have some really powerful conversations. And then we ended the year with a musical evolution virtual field trip, which was really neat because it took a lot of Southern music, and it tied into like Black history, and it was really a powerful event. At the end of the year, I met with my 3 equity leads, and I want to give them a shout out. Ashley Long, she's the media specialist. Tiffany Long is my Title I teacher, and then Vera Jemison is my one of my EFE teachers. The 3 of us sat down and we just sort of reflected on, you know, what have we done since we've opened Tally in terms of equity, and where do we feel like we need to go to next. And something that really stood out to me was they all, and I agreed with them, said, we've been doing all this powerful learning. Everyone on our staff is trained in Beyond Diversity. We've been having these book studies, but what are we really doing that's impacting the kids in the classroom? So we agreed that as we looked into our school improvement plan, it was time to put words into actions. So this summer, I did a lot of personal study around equity and read several books. One of them was Street Data, the Next Generation Model for Equity, Pedagogy, and School Transformation. And one of the quotes that really stood out to me was equity first and foremost is pedagogical. So as we started having conversations as a staff during pre-planning, we're like, how can we impact our kids? And we immediately said, well, that's the instruction in the classroom. Continuing with the powerful conversations that we're having around with our book studies and collaboration with our PTO, but what do we need to do in the classroom? And that is changing what's going on, instructionally in our classrooms. Okay. As I read a few other books this summer, Serena Hammond mentioned John Hattie's research, and another book that the foreword was written by Glenn Singleton. They all mentioned John Hattie's research. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but John Hattie is someone that I have really been following for quite a while. I really believe in his work and think it's very, very powerful. I never have made the connection to his work and closing the achievement or opportunity gap between our white and our kids of color. And so I was very excited when I was seeing in some of the equity books that I was reading that they were referencing his research. Just to to give you a little bit of a summary about it, it's like 30 years now. It started when he first introduced it. There was like 195 meta-analyses. About 200 million students worldwide were involved in the research. Now it's up to over 340 million students involved, and many more meta-analyses. But what he has done is looked at all the things that schools do to impact student achievement in the classroom. And he developed what he calls the hinge point, which is point 4. So what I was reading this summer was that schools really need to look at anything that teachers do in the classroom that has more of an impact, point 4 or higher. So some of the things that you see over on the right are some of the things that have tremendously high impact. Teacher collective efficacy. So with our professional learning communities, when teachers really believe that they can impact the achievement of a student. Teacher clarity goes to us opening our lessons with learning targets and learning intentions, so the students truly know what it is that they're supposed to be learning. 0.75, providing feedback to our kids. 0.73, doing our formative assessments, which I know the curriculum office is getting ready to start doing a lot of work around assessment. 0.90, and then teacher-student relationships. developing that classroom culture where kids know that they can take a risk, that if they make a mistake, it's okay. Teachers will learn from that and help guide them. So what does that mean for culturally responsive teaching? Again, listening some of these that came from some of Zaretta Hammond's work. These are also some of the strategies that you would see in Hattie's work. Learning intentions, developing challenging success criteria. Success criteria being that the kids know what it is that they're supposed to be able to do. So you're really building that student agency where students can be the leaders of their own learning. Just using a wide range of strategies, the feedback, connecting students' culture, languages, and life experiences, what they're learning in the classroom. And then also just not using traditional forms of assessment, but alternate ones, like performance tasks and other things like that. So what our next step at Tally, we want to, as a school, to develop a walkthrough tool to monitor the implementation of culturally responsive teaching strategies. We have a really strong equity committee, and the equity committee is really invested in developing this tool and doing monthly walkthroughs through our classrooms to see how we're doing that at school. We're going to obviously have to do our first one to collect baseline, and from that baseline, we'll set goals, and then we'll analyze that data to see what professional development needs that we need to do as a staff. And then finally, ultimately, our goal is to close the opportunity gap between our white students and our students of color, because it's still there. We're in our third year of Tally. We have, iReady data, we have some map data, we have, classroom data, and our kids of color are still underperforming. So that's not acceptable to us, and so these are the things that we want to do when we feel like we're really making an impact.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Heaton?
I don't have any questions, but I'm excited about the walkthrough tool, the culturally responsive evaluation tool. That's exciting.
Dr. Banks did the first CRE training with Tally staff yesterday, and she mentioned a walkthrough tool that would be used. So that's something that we're going to try to take a look at and get obviously her input and see if that's something that we can use and maybe tweak and for our classroom walkthroughs.
This is a great update. Thank you. And the work of equity is definitely a continuum, and so everything has to happen. Things have to happen first before the next thing happens, and so it's good to see that you all are in that space of saying, how can we put this to action? But you have to do all the things before in order to get where you are right now. And sometimes we want to jump the gun and just make it happen. And now you have the buy-in of all of your teachers, all of your staff. They've all had the training, and so now you're ready. So thank you just for updating us on that, and I look forward to hearing more updates from your school. Yeah.
And I appreciate your work. I remember when you did a lot of innovative work with reading at Claremont, and just your ability to really dig in and understand where what's happening in the classroom during school, and you even did things after school for those children to really help them and get them where they needed to be. So I'm excited now that you're, one level higher at the now 3 through 5, seeing where those kids are coming and being able to help them and carry forward a lot of the work that you already have been doing at Claremont previously and now at Tally. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm pleased to call myself a Tally dad. And my first introduction to Billy was in an interview where you shared your passion for Title I education, your desire to be a Tally. And from my perspective, at least, that's carried through as you've opened up that school. And I want to thank you for all you've done for my family and our community, and let's keep working.
Thank you.
Thank you. Billy is one of our amazing principals, and is one of the things that we're prioritizing is building a culture of data. And Billy is a leader of leaders among that area, so he's definitely an example to watch. So thank you, Mr. Heaton. You do a great job.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're moving on to our public comments. You'll have 3 minutes for public comment. Please let us know, give us your name and let us know how you're affiliated with the school district. And just remember, if there's anything that is that needs to be dealt with on a personal matter, either with one of the board members or the superintendent, we will definitely schedule some time so that we can address your issue individually. So we have two commenters, Shannon?
Two commenters.
All right.
The first will be Kunle Ogana.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, not bad. She said my name decently well, thank you. Hey, good evening, everybody, good to see everyone again. So happy to see everybody in person, and I'm glad we're all still standing. My name is Kunle Ogana. I'm a parent of two children in the school system, Decatur High School and Renfrew. First topic I want to bring up is on crisis management. I have communicated to the board in the past. I feel like our attorneys were deficient in their role as advisors when it came to crisis management. We were very amateurish earlier in the year with all the nonsense that went around. There was no reason for that. Things could have been ended very quickly. I don't know that I, as a taxpayer, have faith in their abilities. I think you guys should query them again. Do they know what they are doing when it comes to crisis management? I'm not speaking about their legal abilities, but as crisis management firm, terrible. We were just laughing stock of the state, in my opinion. Second comment is how I'd love to see if next month we could get a presentation from the schools, from the administration, on how we are preparing our students for the emerging industries of this 21st century. Cybersecurity, big data, cloud, aviation technology, renewable energies, virtual realities. These careers no longer require the traditional 4-year college route. We have the opportunity to transform lives and generations by encouraging the students who have the interest, the desire, the aptitude to go into these professions. And I'd love us as a school district to be intentional about that. Because there's no need to go that traditional, take a college loan, go to 4 years college, and wait. There are opportunities now, certificate programs, community college programs that will take people into high-paying careers. So I bring that up and hope that we can talk to the administration and see if we could have a presentation around that. Thank you. Good to see everybody.
Thank you.
Next up is Zach Abdullahi.
My name is Zach Abdullahi. I'm a junior at Decatur High School.
My name Decatur has often been described as a community that possesses a vast majority of key values needed to make a city a pleasant place for both the citizens and students alike. Key values such as the likes of acceptance, diversity, equality, justice, and open-minded policies. All the fundamental values that most people can agree make a community just that, a community. But words can only do so much, can only go so far, and mean so much. To truly hold meaning, they need to be aligned with actions. Actions speak louder than words could have. For all those values to be rooted in truth, they need to be reflected throughout Decatur. While I do agree that for the most part Decatur does a relatively good job of living up to those standards and values, I also believe is lacked in a few areas. The historical remnants of our flawed past are constant reminders of the work still needed to get done to achieve our goals regarding the progress of people of color. Carl G. Renfro, the individual our middle school is named after, served as a superintendent for city schools of Decatur from 1959 to 1975. Although Renfro became superintendent after the Brown versus Board of Education case was settled, Renfro resisted desegregating city schools and is remembered by residents for racially biased decisions and language.
Decatur city schools were a part of the country's letter to desegregated across the nation. Renfro played an essential role in the delaying of desegregation, stating that he was against the merging of black and white students in school environments. It was decided that the school would take after the name and instill a sense of fear into black students attending. to make a point to let them know that contrary to their belief, that progress is still being made towards their equity and equality, there is still power to be held over their heads. And no matter what, they would still never be fitting enough to deserve equal treatment in their eyes. I feel it's slightly hypocritical that Decatur stresses equality, diversity, and justice, but the only school to be named after an individual is a man whose views are personal at best, and views that directly oppose what he claims to advocate for in this district. I begin to question what messages this sends for youth, especially our youth of color. In light of these revelations, we'd like to propose the idea of renaming the school into something more suitable, something that would more accurately depict what we stand for as a community. Our petition advocating for the renaming of this school that was put out 48 hours ago has already gained traction within the community, gaining almost 550 signatures. This leads us to believe that the best course of action would be to name the school after a prominent Black historical figure within Decatur. This would ensure that the school will be named after someone who the entire community believes we should honor, but simultaneously sending a positive message for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all, Shana? Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, so we will move on to the superintendent comments.
And you ready?
Good.
Oh, a clicker, yay! That'll make life so much easier. Thank you. If I can, do you think it'll reach back there?
Yes.
Look at this, okay. Well, I have to say, here we go. Oh, see, too many clicks. Just a couple of things for me to share tonight. I just want to commend our school district for a great first week of school. And talk about our two-way communication channels and then share some of our COVID updates. So the first day of school last week, I can't believe it was just last Tuesday, I made it to every single one of our schools and got to spend great time with our staff, with our students, with our teachers, our principals. And it was just such a fun day for me to get back into classrooms with our students. A couple of my favorite things that happened, I went to Glenwood, and as I was walking in, the students were eating lunch outside, a class of kindergarten students, and I just had a conversation with one of the little girls, and she was eating lunch, and I asked what she was in her bento box, and the next thing I knew, there was a line of students all ready to show me what was in their lunch. So that was awesome. Winona Park, this girl just ran up and gave me the biggest hug. It was so sweet. It was just such a great day. Westchester, I was so amazed. I went into Miss Frick's classroom, and the kids were already learning how to graph. I was like, way to hit the ground running. It was amazing. Or not Frick's, Word. So just a great day overall. Really enjoyed seeing our students. And for me, just love watching the kids walk to school, seeing them in the, on the sidewalks, heading to school. There was just such joy in the community on last Tuesday, and then every day since. Now I'll tell you, the traffic I have to get used to again and leave a little bit early, but I will put up with that to have our kids in the buildings there. The teachers and the students are doing a great job. So made it to all the schools. It was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. Here's some pictures from high school and one of our other elementary schools, and the kids were just doing a great job with their masks. Teachers are just helping the kids remember to stay socially distanced and to keep up with that, all of our mitigation protocols. So just to share with our community, and some of this is new two-way communication, some of this is just a reminder of what we already have. So one of our two-way communications that I implement as a superintendent is I meet monthly with our system school level leadership team, and they are representatives from each of the school leadership teams. So all of our schools have leadership teams. The principal and another member serve on the system level leadership team, and they bring information to me. I share information with them that they take back to their schools and share with their local communities. So that's one of our two-way communication channels. The other one is our teacher advisory council. So every school has a teacher that serves on this council. I meet with them once a month, and they have been instrumental in taking information back to our schools and getting feedback from the teachers. And I've really tasked them with helping support the principals, share information, gather the feedback, review that feedback from the teachers, and bring it back to me. And that has been so helpful as we were looking at several things as we were planning for this upcoming school year. A new one coming up for next year is our S-squared AT. So this is a student advisory council. So superintendent student advisory team. This will be new for next year. So students, we will be sending out communication on how you can serve on this team. I will meet with these students once a month. I'm going to be meeting with, I can't remember if we'll select 3 or 4 students from each grade level at the high school, as well as students from 8th grade. So I'll meet with the students at the high school once a month, and then I'll have a separate meeting with students at the middle school. And similar to what I do with Teacher Advisory Council, share with them any upcoming decisions that are kind of on the cusp of being made, getting their input, getting their feedback on things, and just getting to hear the voices of our students for how our school system is for our students. We know that our students are our first customers of the school system, and I want to hear directly from our students to hear how they experience school on a daily basis. Another new team that we are forming is a classified staff advisory committee. So we have our teacher advisory council, but I also want to make sure I'm hearing the voices of our classified staff, our custodians, our bus drivers, our clerical staff, anyone that's not necessarily quote a teacher, paraprofessionals, to make sure that they also have their voice at the table as we make decisions, and that I'm hearing their perspectives as well, and things that concern those members of our teams that aren't necessarily in the teaching profession just yet. So, and then our other one is I also meet with our admin council, and that is district and school leaders, and similar protocols is the information we talk about as a group, they take back to their teams, get it for feedback, and bring it back to me what that feedback has been. The other kind of retool, we've had these committees in the past, and we are brushing them off and breathing life back into these committees. So each of our departments at the Wilson Center will have an advisory team that they will be meeting with parents and teachers that will serve on these teams, just to make sure as a department that we are transparent with our communication, we're engaging stakeholders in the decision-making process so that we can make well-informed decisions, that we've heard multiple perspectives as we move forward and make decisions. So some of the two-way communication channels, just wanted to give people a heads up about that, and as well as the board, so that when you hear about these and we bring feedback and we say this came from our S-squared AT meeting, you know that we're talking about our student advisory team. Okay, next thing, I wanted to dive into some COVID updates and protocols. So first I want to share on our webpage, and I'll share this with the board as well. And let's see, can we click on that? Yeah, could you open that link? Thank you, Eston. Okay, so all of our information, the most up-to-date information, is on our health and safety webpage. So we have reformatted, and we're still in the process of cleaning up our overall school system webpage, and we have a health and safety tab. And in that tab, you will see all the up-to-date information. And one of the pages in there is our COVID communication. And in that you will have, oh, here we go. In there you will see a link for all of our mitigation strategies. And in there is linked just our general COVID mitigation strategies, which is kind of a table of the summary of all of our mitigation strategies. And then we also added in there our big healthy facilities and schools manual, which is a nice 30-page manual. If you get tired and you want to try to get some sleep, start reading our healthy schools manual, and that will put you to sleep. But it is lots of great information about all the specific things, very much in detail on protocols for our schools to follow. So for parents listening, for everyone, our webpage is the place to go for the most updated information. That's where we will be housing everything. Over the summer, we had some drafts with Google Docs. We've turned those off, so you can't access those anymore, because we want to make sure people are going to the most recent information, which is on our webpage. Also on there is information about our Binox Now testing, and that is the testings that we give at schools when people are symptomatic. The other item on there are our screeners, just so people can remember, hey, here's another review of what symptoms may be showing or demonstrating the likelihood that someone has COVID. And the other thing that's on there, Eston, if you can pull up our COVID report. Okay. And what I want to talk about a little bit and help make sure that the board has any questions about our COVID report. So on the COVID report, we are updating this weekly. So there was some questions about why not update it every day, and there's a couple reasons why we don't update it every day. Is it takes a long time to get all the information. So last year we were updating it every day. Information would change hourly sometimes on COVID information. And because we are dedicated to being transparent and to make sure we're building trust with our communication, I talked with Dr. Huddleston and her team, and we really felt that a weekly update was the best way to make sure that that data is constant, and we're not trying to chase our tails updating information all the time on a regular basis. So on the data, we will update it once a week. Mondays at noon is when we will present that data. And what you'll see in the data is we've listed all of our schools as well as our facilities. And then we have two things that we're tracking. We're tracking people that test positive if they were on school grounds. So if someone came to school, let's say today, they went home with symptoms, they didn't feel well, they tested at home, they stay home tomorrow, and they tested positive for COVID, that information is what we track in our dashboard. If it is someone who was out of town for a week, came back from their trip on Friday night, then they didn't feel well, and on Saturday they get tested, they get their results Saturday night, and they were positive for COVID, we don't put information on here. That person's data would not show up on our dashboard. We're only tracking data for cases that happen in our school. So that's the data you will see there for positive cases. And so last week we had a total of 10 positive cases, 7 students and 3 staff members. Now, I did get emails after we put this data on and parents saying, hey, my kid tested positive at this school and I don't see their data on there. And I said, was your child ever in a building before they tested positive? No, they were not. So no, they're not going to show up on this data. We're only interested in tracking the data in our school. We are tracking school COVID data. We're not tracking community COVID data. And that's the difference for what schools have to report. And also to note here that students or staff members that are in the positive category, those are isolations. So there's a difference between isolation and those under quarantine. And that's another question that I was getting several emails about this week was, hey, I know that this person tested positive, but no one's quarantining. Well, actually the person that tested positive is isolating. The people that were deemed as close contact, those are the people that quarantine. So a good example of this is if you look at the Claremont line, we had 1 student test positive, we had 2 students that were quarantined. You can infer from this is that there were 2 students in close contact at Claremont to that 1 student that tested positive. So then the total is 3 students have been taken out of the school setting because of either 1 testing positive and the 2 that were in close contact. So that's some of the clarification on that. We will post updates every Monday by noon, if not sooner, but no sooner than Monday morning. So we will do this update. And then just to also clarify for this information, Friday afternoon, we were still contact tracing for a positive student at Westchester. So we posted by noon our data, but we knew that we would have some lingering data for Westchester as it related to close contact. So we put that disclaimer on there, hey, just so you know, the quarantine data may change because we're still identifying students that were in close contact that Monday morning. So there is a little bit of a lag. We know it's not the up-to-date information on a daily basis, but it is good data that we can stand behind when we share it with our community. The other thing to note is we do share information in real time with the school. So anytime there is a student that tests positive, we let the whole school community know. So at Westchester, that school knew immediately that there was a student that had tested positive for COVID and that we were completing contact tracing so that they were informed of that. So that's the communication that happens in real time for our COVID positive students. But also to note is we track and we monitor this data as a school system constantly. So Lily and I are in constant communication about possible cases, probable cases, positive cases, quarantines. And our nurses do a really phenomenal job with the contact tracing protocol. I had a conversation with a nurse yesterday about the protocol and her contact tracing and just getting her expertise. And that's one of the things that's really beneficial to have fully certified nurses in our schools, is because they can make those expert decisions in real time. And she was asking me a question, and I said, I'm relying on you as the expert. So you tell me, as the medical expert in that building, what is your recommendation? And I'm standing behind what they recommend because they are the medical experts in our schools. So that is our COVID data. Let me get back to my presentation. So the next thing, you can pull up my presentation again, Eston, thank you, is we are beginning surveillance testing coming soon. So surveillance testing is, we will be screening students and staff once a week in our schools. We're still working on the logistics. So we've been kind of working on this behind the scenes for a while. We hadn't shared this publicly because we wanted to make sure we had all the resources and the things lined up so that we could do surveillance testing. The Department of Health for Georgia is supporting this initiative for school districts, so we were able to use resources from the state. So we do not have to pay for these resources, but it does take a lot of logistical planning and figuring out how do we do the surveillance testing. So because we have almost 6,000 students and over 1,000 staff members, just logistically getting all those swabs, collecting the data, looking at the data, reviewing the data, and then we'll have to contact trace based on any positive information that we get. That takes a lot of planning to make sure we've got all those kinks worked out so we can launch it successfully. So it's coming soon. It has been in the works for a while. We just didn't want to put it out there before we were 100% sure when we were getting close. So we are getting closer to getting that surveillance testing up and going. So feel like that we can share with our community that we are going to be implementing that. I don't have a start date just yet. We're still finalizing a few things before they give us a start date, but I'm really excited about that. I know that's a protocol being used in many school districts around us, and I'm glad we're able to start doing that this year as well. Also, COVID vaccination data, we are still collecting this data. So we have kind of trying to chase down people to give us this data to turn it in, but once we do finalize this data for staff and students, we will share this as well. And we will just publicly share this is the % of staff vaccinated, this is the % of students vaccinated, so that information will be shared as well once we finish collecting that. Also, a question that we get a lot is people asking, can we require vaccinations for staff and students? And that is something that we are working on. The board has been shared with, we've shared some information with the board. We're looking at this with our legal counsel to determine if this is something that City Schools of Decatur can do. We do know that vaccinations are the first and best defense against COVID, and we definitely want to do what we can as a school district to protect our students, but this is more than just saying wear a mask. So a mask is a very unobtrusive mitigation strategy. It gets a little bit different when you're talking about putting medication and shots in people's arms, so we want to make sure we're following best advice that we can find. So reviewing this, but more information will come out about this as we make that decision as a board. Then the last question I've been getting a lot is, do we have a tipping point for when the district would switch to full virtual? And what I'll say is the CDC, along with the American Academy of Pediatrics, prioritizes in-person learning. So they have said when you have actually they didn't say rigorous, but when they multi-layered mitigation strategies in place, in-person learning is safe. And we have a very rigorous mitigation strategy, many layers within our school system. So I feel like we will be able to continue offering in-person learning safely for our students and staff. And we review the efficacy of these mitigation strategies, and we adjust them as needed. So like I said with surveillance testing, we didn't have it in place at first, but now that we have seen the data, we see the numbers going up, feel comfortable, like, yes, let's add another layer to our mitigation plan so that we can enhance that and further identify any possible positive students and make sure that we are not having students that may be or staff members that may be COVID positive within our building. So we continually monitor this. Our operations team does building walks. They collect data on how our mitigation strategies are being implemented, and we review that data. We haven't pulled the data yet, but once we do, we will look at that data and determine, hey, is there more training that's needed for staff, or do we need more supports in a certain area to make sure that those mitigation strategies are 100% effective. So that's our COVID update. And I put this graphic in here just for our parents and for the board to notice, like, this is our plan when we're contact tracing and how we communicate. So when we learn that there's a probable or positive case, the contact tracing begins. We identify people that were in close contact. We notify staff and anyone else that was directly affected, including the school community, which is here number 4. They all get an email. And then as we get that information together, we update that once contact tracing has been completed. And just a big shout out, Shonda Moore has done such a phenomenal job organizing these vaccination events with the DeKalb Department of Health. We've had 2 successful events already. We have another one scheduled for this Friday. So this Friday, it's a 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. again at the high school. And it's free for everyone in the community, so please come out. If you have questions about the vaccine, they have people there that can help answer those questions and talk to you about vaccines. So we are encouraging as many people as possible to come and get their vaccination for COVID. We just feel like that is the best defense against COVID, and to make sure we can continue to operate our schools safely for our students is getting as many people vaccinated as possible. So it's going to be a great year. I think we've had a good start already, and I know we're going to see more great things to come.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So there are just a couple of items. I wanted to first just give a thank you to Adina Walker and her team. They've really done a phenomenal job with the hiring and onboarding all of our new staff members and just kind of helping everyone get acclimated to our new kind of normal back to life type of living. And so I just thank you and your department and all the departments as well for the work that they've been putting in returning to full days. Thank you very much for that. I wanted to thank Dr. Furman for the COVID dashboard and for the update and all of the information that we're gathering, all of the work that the nurses are doing. And I really appreciate all the time that it takes, all the data and time that it takes to put out and make it available for our parents. So I just want to thank you and your staff for staying on top of that. And I'm also listening and adjusting when necessary. I'm super excited about this first week of school. Me personally, being able to walk my youngest and last child to school and be amongst the parents and the hustle and the bustle again and the talking and the dog walking and people carrying their coffee and, you know, I don't think I realized how much I missed it until I had an opportunity to do it again. And my, you know, high schooler does not want me to walk with him to school, so at least I get to experience with her for a couple more years maybe. But I know from just some of the principals and hearing from the principals, they're all excited about being back in the building. The teachers are excited about being back in the building. I know that the kids are and the parents are, and so it just, it does feel good to just continue to be in this space together and work together to make it, you know, a very positive situation. So we will, along with Dr. Furman, some of us board members will also be doing some school visits as well, just so that we can also get a bird's eye as to how things are going, not to check on you or make sure you're doing everything right, but just so that we can show you that we support you, we support our teachers. We know how hard last year was, and we just want to be able to come and say thank you for all that you do, and also listen if there's anything that you need to talk to us about. So hopefully you'll be okay with seeing our faces in your schools in the upcoming weeks. I'm definitely looking forward to it. It's been a while since I've been in all of the buildings, so I'm very excited about that. And lastly, I just wanted to give a thank you and a shout out to our community members and specifically our parents. You know, we get a lot of emails, and we've always gotten a lot of emails, which is okay. But there was a time frame when they were very hard to read, and they came from positions that felt like positions of confrontation. And we know how personal your children are. And so when there's something going on with our children, we get very personal. But what I appreciate is that we're still hearing from parents. So we're hearing from parents in a more collaborative way. There's still something going on. There's still an issue that we need to address. There's still an item that they're worried about. But they're coming to us knowing that we're on the same team and that our goal is to make the experience with your kids the best that we can. And if we're falling short of that, we need to hear about it, but we also want to work together to solve it. And I'm really seeing such a shift in how all of us are communicating with each other, and just being able to listen to one another and address the real issues that are happening. And so I just want to give, I definitely want to say that to all the parents that are listening now, or any that are in the room, to just thank you for working with us and continuing to bring to us what you need to bring to us, so that we can do a better job and continue to improve every day. So you all are rock stars. We love working with all of you, and just keep it up. So board members, do you all have anything that you wanted to touch on before we move to consent items?
I stopped by the, I don't know what the official name of it was, but the DeKalb Board of Health truck was out there that day, and Beacon Hill was giving away school supplies, and there were haircuts being given to students who needed, who wanted a haircut, and they were free. And then there was a food truck that was out there. It was just wonderful to see and experience. And folks were, socially distanced-ish. We were outside though, and most people had on masks. But it was just, it was great to see the community come together again. And so, just want to thank those folks who helped put that event together. And DEF, I know, was a key partner in that. That was on opening day. And thanks to the barbers and Beacon Hill, and I don't know who the food truck vendors were, but they were a big hit. And so it was a great event.
Thank you, Gina.
I just want to say that it was so much fun to attend opening day. And it was an in-person and virtual hybrid event, and kudos to Maggie and the principals and everyone who was involved in pulling that off, because it was really awesome. Each school had their own kind of back to school opening day cheer session, and we were collaborating virtually with all the schools, being able to share, and just to be able to be, in person to the degree that we were, and share that energy was so much fun to kick off the school year. So that was fun. And then that same day was the ice cream truck social that traveled around the district. Another really fun way to just be out and connect and see each other. And I too stopped by the vaccination clinic, which I think is phenomenal, and kudos to Shonda Moore and her team for leading that effort to get vaccinations easily accessible to our students and our faculty and teachers and anyone in our community. So it's not limited just to school people, it's open to the whole community, so anyone can go. And also, just a note to parents, it's super convenient, they also offer sports physicals. So any student who needs that, they can show up and get that done as well. So it's a great service to our community to bring that closer and to lower that threshold for many to be able to access the vaccine. I also want to say that I do serve as the board liaison to the Decatur Education Foundation, and we just had our annual retreat kickoff meeting last night, where the entire DEF board met, and Dr. Furman attended, and it was also our first meeting in person since I've even been on that board. So that's how long it's been. And just being able to connect with one another and share that energy was really wonderful and inspiring. And I just want to publicly share how grateful I am for the Decatur Education Foundation, and that we have this fantastic partnership with them. And I look forward to all the things that we're going to be able to do this year and beyond together with them. So.
Okay.
Gosh, I don't have anything along the same lines, but I wanted to make a comment about the superintendent's report. Really, just one of the items that you mentioned is the question of whether we can require vaccinations. And I'm glad we're looking into that. And I feel like we should have some discussion about it. I thought I'd just put it out there that I think we should lean into it. I'm very much in favor of requiring vaccinations to the extent we can. I know that there's some equity issues with that. I know that there are some legal issues with that. But I also, so we need to sort that out. But to the extent we can find our way to do it, I think it's the right thing to do. We had an incident at our house recently
where we were informed that one of our children, in an activity that they participated in, had been in close contact with an adult who tested positive. And my first question was that adult vaccinated? And the answer was no, they just didn't get vaccinated. I was so angry that this irresponsible person exposed not only my daughter, but my entire extended family that had been in close contact by not getting the vaccine, just because they didn't do it. And it made me reflect that if I were a parent sending my kid to school and a teacher, a staff member, didn't get the vaccine and then exposed my child, I would be livid. And I really don't think that's fair. And so I just wanted to put it out there that to the extent this is something that we find that we can do and that we can do in a way that's fair, it's something that I would support. Otherwise, I also wanted to tell you what I told you the other day, which is I think you're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you.
And congratulations on a first successful opening week. And the communications, the entire climate, it's just a breath of fresh air. And so, good work. And keep it up.
Dr. Comment, one other question.
Sure.
Regarding, you addressed, we've been getting the questions of what would we do, are we thinking about when we would decide if things need to shut down? And if you could just share kind of what we talked about in terms of we are still following the DeKalb Board of Health guidance in terms of if there are, maybe you can, because I don't want to mess up, if there are two, what an outbreak is, and how that would guide us.
So if there is an in-school outbreak, there are guidelines set up in our manual for when we would identify that. So I don't want to say the wrong thing, and I would have to pull it up to make sure I get the language correct. But if we meet the threshold of an outbreak in a school, we have protocols that we would follow for the school to close a school for a certain number of days, make sure that everything is clean, complete contact tracing, and go through that protocol. So there is possibilities that, yes, an outbreak, if it occurred at a school, we would follow the DeKalb Board of Health protocols for that to make sure that we were operating. So that is something that is on, a possibility. We do follow the Board of Health guidelines for that, so that we have a nice protocol to follow.
And along the lines of what Louis was bringing up, do we know of other school districts in Georgia who are mandating vaccines?
Not in Georgia, no.
Not in Georgia? Okay. I'm just curious.
Not that there aren't, I just don't know of any.
Right, we just don't know of any at this point. Okay.
Yeah.
Or anything else, board members?
What are I know you don't have a date for surveillance testing, so what are we working on? When could we see something like that?
I've got to touch base with Dr. Huddleston. She's been in communications with the companies that are going to be doing that for us.
Okay.
And I don't want to, give it to
So
you
that's
out
what,
there.
it's working with a company, we've checked the boxes.
Yep.
For legal, personal, and
Yes.
getting it up and running.
Exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And for mandating vaccines, are we talking about students and teachers, students that qualify, who, meet the age threshold? We're talking about students and staff, or just staff?
That's a good question. I think we address staff first as we go through that conversation, and then we look at students.
All right, so moving on to consent items. We have the personnel report, the school nutrition report, the financial report, the report to approve contracts for additional student devices, approve the career and technical education FY 2022 state and federal grants, and also the 2022 and 23 school calendar. I believe these are a few items that we've already discussed prior, correct? So they're just, we're just in the consent form now. So if there aren't any further questions on that, do I have a motion to approve the consent items?
I didn't get a chance to look at the revised calendar because there were some changes. Could we just pull that up real quick? Would that be possible to look at that together?
Yes. Yeah, there were some typos on that, and I did find those and fix those.
So what will we do, move that to discussion, that item to discussion? Right, okay. So move to approve the calendar, we're moving that to the discussion item, and then we'll go back to the consent items, and do I have a motion for the consent items minus the school calendar.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, so now we can move on to the discussion items, and would you like to go ahead and start with the 23 calendar, Dr. Firma, or do we need a few minutes for that
Let
one?
me get it printed for you guys.
Okay.
And so I'll jump into let me share this with Ms. Bruton. All right, Shayna, I just sent you a link to the calendar. Could you get those printed? And then we'll have that to look at for discussion. Thank you.
All right, so then the first item for discussion, while we're waiting on the calendar, is the future governance training and board priorities.
Yeah. This one was the school improvement plan. District, first we're gonna do the district improvement plan because that then leads into the priorities.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so, it's up there, and board members, you should have a copy of this presentation. I'll get a copy of the presentation. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, doesn't matter.
It's that.
It should be right on
That one
the,
right there. It's this presentation right here. Here you go. Okay, so I'm gonna review with our district improvement plan, kind of where we've been, where we are right now, and where we are going. So first I wanna just talk quickly historically where we've been over the past several months, part of the school year. So last February, Lily and myself and Christy Beam and Mary Banks did a kind of a high-level view of our district improvement plan. The work that was coming up, really framing some of the big goals that we were setting, some of the ambitious goals we were setting, and really looked at what are we going to focus on going forward as a school system. Then in March of 2021, I shared this framework, this overview presentation with the public, with our stakeholders, with our teachers, also sent out feedback forms to gather input and feedback from our stakeholders. And then in April, we shared our coherence framework, and that is how everything ties together. How do we take our vision and mission? How do we take a theory of action, build a framework for equitable outcomes, all the way to create what I call a through line from each individual teacher's classroom to build for district-wide school improvement, or district-wide improvement for our students. And that was the coherence framework presentation that went out to our public. I shared that in a board meeting, and then we also gathered feedback on that. And then we held some public stakeholder input meetings. So we did two of those. We did May 3rd and May 12th, where we presented this information to the public, to staff, to parents, to community members, gathered their input and feedback. And then what we worked on was, for the schools, is then getting the schools up and going so they were ready to implement these plans in their school buildings starting in August. And we started this way back, it may not seem like so long ago, but back in May, I presented more detailed information about our district and school district improvement plan to our principals. They took that information, presented it to their teachers, and then in June, we really dug deeper into unpacking our three pillars, which are advancing racial equity, accelerating student learning, and building and sustaining a positive culture and climate. And then at our superintendent staff meeting, where we really dug into those three pillars and what do those look like, then we gave our staff, our schools and departments time to really start working on their individual plans so that they were ready to jump in to their plans when students and staff returned in August. Then in July, I took time, the principals and departments submitted their plans. I took time over July to review those plans, give them some feedback on their plans, so that we were ready to jump into the start of the school year when our staff returned with trainings, with professional learning, ready to know how we're going to collect and measure data. And then just this month, I shared at opening day our remarks to all of our school staff and all of our CSD staff about our framework for equitable outcomes for students, how that really guides our work that we do every day, and how that supports our way to achieve our vision and mission. So where are we now? So where we are now is we have a very clear, a very concise, and very actionable theory of action, along with a coherence framework and a framework for equitable outcomes for our students. So you will be seeing this slide a lot as we go forward, because this is what frames all of our work as a school district. This is what brings us together and helps us understand are the things that we're doing, are they working, are they not working, and then how do we pivot if they're not working. So our theory of action really really talks about balancing accountability with empowerment. So if a teacher is doing it really well and knocking it out of the park and meeting all and exceeding all the expectations we have, then we will go ahead and say, hey, what are you doing that you can share with other people? Instead of micromanaging people, we want to empower our teachers to do the best things for students. So we want to capture what those teachers are doing. And we really feel that through effective leadership at the school and district level, we are helping our teachers to ensure that they are delivering that highly effective instruction. We also want to support our teachers through their growth and development as professionals, and that's how we're going to get equitable outcomes for students. So all of that theory of action drives our framework for equitable outcomes for students, which encapsulates our 3 pillars of achieving racial equity, accelerating student learning, and building a positive culture and climate. And then within those 3 pillars, we have our strategic priorities and initiatives. And our strategic priority is to pay the educational debt to students from historically marginalized racial groups. And we do that through our major strategic initiatives, which are social emotional learning curriculum, restorative practices, and PBIS, and really leaning into our instructional framework, which talks about the relationship between the content, the students, and the teachers, our core practices for equity, and then high leverage instructional practices. And tying all that back into the schools is every school and every department then takes those strategic priorities, strategic initiatives, and develops action plans for how they're going to operationalize those in their school buildings, and developing SMART goals to track and monitor progress, reviewing and tracking data on a regular basis, and then also evaluating, is our plan going as we hoped it would? And then undergirding all of that is our core beliefs of that we need to be as leaders accountable for the equitable outcomes for our students through ethical governance and leadership, transparent communication, stakeholder engagement, and regular progress monitoring and reporting. So you will see this slide a lot because we will be putting this on our presentations for the board, presentations for our teachers, presentations for department, because this is what drives our work. This is the core work that we are doing every day as a school district. Where are we going? So we've got that big plan. Now we've got to kind of figure out how do you take it to the next level to break it down to be implemented in the classroom. So we are using the Cognia tool that is what's used for accreditation, so that once we come to accreditation 5 years from now, we just dump all this into the accreditation bucket. It's already in there. You just click and send it, and then they are ready to go for when we have to do our accreditation again in 5 years. And this is a nice data tracking tool to help us go through accreditation even easier the next time around. So what we've done is we've created objectives for each of our pillars, and then teased out even further our critical initiatives for each of our 3 areas, and then further identified what are the key measures that we are going to use to collect data. So we've listed lots of different data pieces for how we are going to track the data. So you'll see lots of different key measures here, and this is the areas that we're going to use to collect data, so that as we track this progress over time, we're making those database decisions and not just kind of waiting to the end of the year, see how the students perform, and make decisions. We're going to be tracking progress throughout the school year. So that's where we are. So where are we going? So we are here in August, and we left in August with opening day, schools collecting their baseline data, and that's where we are going to talk about picking up. So the Wilson Center, all of my department chairs, all of my leaders at the district office are developing their own department annual goals to make sure that whatever they do supports what we're doing in our strategic plan. So we know that our teachers and our school leaders are accountable for our students achieving those outcomes that we want them to do, want them to meet, but all of our departments serve to support our teachers in their classrooms. So I want to make sure that all of the department leaders are really focused on how do we support our teachers, how do we remove barriers so that our teachers and school leaders can do their jobs more easily. And then in the schools, they'll be collecting their baseline data and starting to look at that. Then in September, they'll be reviewing and analyzing their baseline data, and then really digging into that implementation of what they've put in their action plans and their school improvement plans. October is a month of really just data collection and monitoring. Then in November, our K-8 schools will have reached the end of their first trimester, so they will do a very formal report on the progress that they've made so far. Decatur High School runs on a semester, so they're still kind of in their data collection process. December is very much a data collection and monitoring month, and then when we get into January, that's when the high school will really give their first half of the year district improvement plan update, and also my Wilson Center department leaders will be giving their mid-year updates as well. And then the last part of this kind of brings us to the end of the school year, some more months of data collection and monitoring, going through this, finalizing plans, reporting out in May, our final data collection and with end of the year assessment results. In June, I will present to the board the final assessment results for the whole school system. And then in July, we'll be reviewing our district plans again and deciding what are the next changes or updates that need to be made for the following school year. And so that kind of brings us to the next topic, which is, so what is the board's work? So as the superintendent, I will make sure that our schools are doing what they need to do, implementing these plans, collecting the data. And we have a good one-year plan. I feel very confident that this is a great year of kind of focusing back on our core, really making sure that we have addressed any learning loss from COVID to really get our students back where we know they need to be after a year and a half of kind of turbulent learning environments. So the work of the board, and that leads into our next agenda item, is really reviewing and updating the board's strategic priorities and what you see as a board for what comes next for City Schools of Decatur. So is it thinking more innovatively? Is it thinking more college and career? What are the things that the board wants to prioritize for our school system going ahead? And setting goals on what we want to achieve as a district, and then determining how we're going to measure those priorities. So that is the next part of the presentation, which really leads into what is in your board packet, which was that Transcend handout. So before we move on to that, any questions or comments from the board? Okay. So what I think, my recommendation for the board is kind of twofold, is I think we need to set some time as a board to really dig in, and I provided this, the Transcend packet that is about defining graduate aims, because I think for a board, looking at what do we want our students graduating after they've been in our system for 12+ years, if they've been at one of our early learning centers, what do we want that student to look like? Where do we want them to go next? What do we want them to demonstrate? And I love this, the Transcend packet, because it really helps you think about what are the areas that you want to focus on, what are some of the outcomes you would want to see. So this is, to me, a discussion item for the board, really to just start the wheels turning so that we can set some time together as a board, or either through our next work session. If this is the direction you want to go, then I will start working through the next phase, which is, okay, chunking this so that we can work through it together as a board in work sessions and have discussions on setting these priorities as we go. Because what I would love to see is that by probably March-ish, we've finalized these priorities so that we are ready now then to take this one-year district improvement plan, look at the priorities and initiatives that the board wants to see, to really create the next 5-year plan so we can start chipping away year after year towards those big ends and those big priorities that the board would set. So that is that part of that. So any questions or comments about that? Any discussion?
Oh, right. Go ahead.
Okay. This question might be, this is a broad question, and I keep talking about it, so I think it's important to keep talking about it. In the policy governance or framework, what we're talking about here are end goals.
Yes.
What are the ultimate priorities for the district? It's very important. It also happens to be something that we did spend a lot of time on And, you know, over the past 2 or 3 years, there's a lot of discussion about end goals. And for end goals to work under this framework, the basic governing philosophy that we've at least adopted previously is that the board's going to set end goals, which are the priorities. You're going to figure out how to implement them. But then there's a next step, which is that the board's not only going to determine how the priorities are going to be measured, but we're going to monitor them on an ongoing basis. And that's where the accountability comes in. So we delegate, so we set priorities, we delegate authority. But then the accountability is that it comes back to us on a regular schedule so that we are fulfilling our responsibility to the community to make sure that the priorities we set are being faithfully implemented and that we're making the progress that we need. The way that what has happened is that we've spent a lot of time talking about end goals, and we haven't done anything about policy monitoring. And as a result, we have half a model and not a functional board. We're not actually doing our jobs. And what I don't want to see is that we go back, revisit, to rework ends policies before we figure out how the whole thing comes together. I mean, we did end policies for 3 years. We need to get the policy monitoring in place. Now, these might have to be done in parallel because you're launching a strategic initiative, so we need to take another look. And so that's fine. But what it can't happen that we go back and just have this endless discussion about ends and never do the policy. Because that's delegation without accountability. It's a terrible model.
So that isn't part of the conversation as well, which is the policy monitoring report schedule that goes along with it. So you're 100% correct. We've got our charter renewal coming up. We need to start thinking strategically about what's going to be in that charter and what kind of flexibility we may ask for. But we also need to monitor what we have in place. So I worked on a policy monitoring calendar. So I went kind of through our board policy manual, broke it out into the sections and each of the policies, and then listed the data sources and documentation, and then also kind of when we would do those reportings out to the board. So the first section is the end, and that really focuses on our district improvement plan, the equitable outcomes for students. And those are reports that you'll get monthly. So every month I'm getting reports from the schools. I'll be sharing that. We'll be doing updates monthly for the board. The second section are the executive limitations. And we have as I was going through this, we have so much of this already in place that I just kind of listed out as I was thinking about these policies. What are the indicators or the data sources that we already have ready that we can start pulling for the board as we go through the year, and just kind of listed those out, and then can give you some updates either annually in a month or monthly. We can do these updates for you. So that's part of this discussion as well, is how, like, when you look at these data sources, is there anything that you want to see that I didn't list here? And is the reporting schedule appropriate, or do you think it needs to happen more frequently? So that's part of the discussion I want to get the board's feedback on.
So I so appreciate that you're on top of this. I knew she was. We talked about it, but I said it kind of for the benefit of the board and everybody else. But the only, I mean, I think a plan, any plan, what we need is a systematic and intentional look at each policy to make sure that it's being implemented. What the actual schedule is less important. I would note that I wonder if a monthly reporting schedule is realistic. The way that we had thought that we were going to do it, and the way that I understand most other policy governance systems do it, is that they devote a place on the calendar to specific policies. And so you look at, okay, today's going to be our check-in on policy, ends policy, whatever it is. I can't remember all the policies, but pick one, and just make sure that over the course of the calendar it's filled in. But I don't, like I said, that to me, it just seems overwhelming potentially to have all these reports.
Well, so the district improvement plan, I think it's logical to do that monthly. I'll be getting monthly reports from the schools. It's something, and for me, the academic outcomes for the students are the major reason that we're here in the system. So I want to keep a pulse on that monthly. And for me, that's essential. So I think giving a report to the board on, hey, how are we doing on these metrics is kind of like a monthly budget update. Like, it should happen.
Okay.
So I'm okay, to me, that's feasible, that we would be reporting on this stuff monthly. The other stuff, some of it's monthly, but that's because we're already generating some reports monthly. Some of it I've targeted as annually in August, annually in September. So some of those kind of more detailed nuances with reporting. And some of it aligns to like when that work gets done. Like some of the stuff, we don't get the data until the end of the year. We don't do the sign off until the end of the year with the state. And that's when we would pull those reports and share them with the board.
Did you look at, we had a draft of this from previous kind of, I don't know if you saw that.
I did.
Some of that, I remember some of the timing, we decided on certain reports because it naturally fell when we were doing a budget
Exactly.
process, or like we talked about, you and I, not long ago, like the safety and, emergency preparedness report was always something we did right when we got back to school, because we would have new staff, you know, that we were training, et cetera. And by the way, I know it says August here, but, since we aren't doing it today, I'm assuming.
The work session.
Then, so that's really something I'm excited about, doing, especially since we haven't been in the building for a year and a half, pretty much. So I think some of these we'll be able to fill in as sort of the calendar year.
Correct.
It naturally flows with our work.
Yeah, I did it, I stopped at section 3, because I wasn't sure how the board wanted to report on your own things, and then superintendent, I just didn't get to.
But this is excellent, and I think it's exactly what we have been building toward and building on what we've been working on in terms of policy governance.
I have more faith that it's going to get done now than I have sometime in the past. But.
Okay.
And for the board section policy, I would think we could probably cover maybe half of those, like in our retreat. And then maybe the other half at a special, work session for.
Yeah, and I think for the board ones too, I think a conversation with the board about, you know, authority and delegation. The document we use to monitor that is the board policy handbook, and it's an annual sign off that you would sign off. Yes, I've read the board policy. I understand that we report out on it. So I think some of those are kind of like an annual just sign off on and acknowledgement for the board.
Okay.
The work plan is something we definitely need to lean into, but I think that goes along with strategic priorities and initiatives. I didn't see any board work plans out there, so I wasn't sure you guys had one. So I felt like that would kind of be something we could talk about at the work session and move forward on formalizing that piece.
I think the work plan in the past, I know that we don't have one now, but the work plan in the past has been, we developed it in work sessions, and it was essentially a calendar of topics.
Gotcha.
And it was really primarily identified work sessions. We kind of identified topics that needed to be addressed to try to slate them into work sessions over the course of the year. We never actually went all 12 months, but we tried to.
We got most of them now. Yeah. Maybe we can do that for our work session this month to set for the rest of the year.
Yeah. And I was, and I also for the work plan, we're gonna do, or for the work session in August, we're gonna do the school safety and security updates. And then I've got our, what's his name, Don Bolia, who is our lobbyist. He's gonna come and walk us through legislative priorities.
We have a lobbyist.
Yeah, we do.
Who?
Don Bolia.
When did that development transpire?
I hired him over the summer.
That's good.
Yeah. He works for Marietta City Schools, he works for Fulton County Schools, already down at the legislative sessions doing the work. And because those are charter systems, he's very much in line with what we would prioritize, I feel, as a charter system.
So will we discuss at that work session what some of our priorities are?
Yeah, so that he can go to the legislative sessions and help make sure that he's putting forward what City Schools of Decatur wants to see, whether it is fully funding the QBE formula or fully funding early learning for students, equity initiatives. he's got his finger on the pulse of what's happening at this district, at the state level, legislative level with culturally responsive education, or CRE, and how, you know, senators and people from outside are trying to regulate what happens in schools. For me, I think local control for school boards is a huge legislative priority that should be one that I would recommend we lift.
And restoring austerity cuts.
Yes.
And,
yes.
and I was thinking, because I read an article about how well the state budget is looking, and I was thinking also it would be nice if we could support fulfilling Kemp's promise to give the full $5,000 in teacher salaries, because we're still 2,000 short on that. So.
Although, are we turned out?
We're not.
No, the state is. We did,
yeah.
but the state
Could potentially give additional 2,000 more.
because that didn't happen because of that abbreviated legislative session because of COVID.
Dr. Furman, I had just two comments about the district improvement plan. And so this is just one thing that has I've been trying to work with. I've been kind of struggling with since I saw it under the last superintendent's administration, and this was a page that I pulled out of the packet that we would put online. It's not in this packet that we see tonight. And so under positive culture and climate, it says by July 2026, race will not be a predictor of student discipline outcomes. And so I have been struggling with that since the first time I read it several months ago, because I'm trying to figure out, when did race become an acceptable predictor of discipline outcomes? Right, I feel like that should be reworded. Okay. Because it's not an acceptable thing, and we have some wonderful things down here that we will, to achieve our goals, you know, that we will do. Comprehensive wraparound supports, including integration of behavioral, physical, and mental health services, and these other things. But, you know, those are not specific to a demographic, you know, so like those things should happen. Yeah. Everyone will benefit from that. But I don't know how these things, you know, I don't know when race became a predictor of discipline outcomes. You understand what I'm saying?
I do, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I'll work with Dr. Huddleston on looking at that language.
Okay. Yeah. And then the other thing I was just thinking about, you know, the first time I heard that term, paying the educational debt, was when Dr. Banks introduced it, and I'm so appreciative to her bringing that to CSD. And so that's a strategic priority, paying the educational debt to students from historically marginalized racial groups. But the initiatives underneath, like restorative practices and PBIS, you know, things that we need, I don't know how those pay the educational debt back to racially marginalized students. Those are things, again, that all students benefit from. And I worry that, I know that there have been folks in the district who thought that, you know, PBIS was targeted for a specific group of kids, and why can't we just do those things with, you know, our frequent flyers, when really everyone benefits from both of those initiatives. And so, you know, I just don't know how those pay the educational, those practices pay back the educational debt to our racially marginalized students.
So, and I'm glad you raised that. I made some notes here. And then, so over the next 3 months, so next month is September, Dr. Banks is going to give a deeper dive into advancing racial equity pillar. And then the following month, Dr. Beam will give a deeper dive into the accelerating student learning pillar. And then Dr. Huddleston in November will give a much deeper dive into the third pillar, building positive culture and climate. So we can make sure we've addressed those. And we probably will have a couple follow-up questions for you just to make sure I clearly understand what you're thinking. But got some notes here. We'll work on those and expect a deeper dive into each of those 3 pillars over the next 3 months.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I agree with Jane. I think that this graphic, the one that she had, does do a better job of categorizing.
Right.
It goes like,
Mm-hmm.
what we're trying to say is eliminate bias,
Mm-hmm.
but it does read as if we're eliminating a predictor. Those are very different
I
things.
see what you're saying.
And that paying the debt should not just be creating systems that are equal. Paying the debt means proactively engaging. So there are some things on this list that do that, such as, creating a curriculum that, there's a multi-tiered behavioral interventions is not one, but implementation of a social learning curriculum, those all seem very neutral. I would like to see if we're gonna use that language something more forward moving.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So I think the next thing for us to so for a board, I think the next conversation is, so are we okay with me kind of calendaring out some work time in our work sessions to dig through kind of what are the next phases of strategic priorities and initiatives so that we can work on these in parallel. We're continuing the monitoring of what we have, but we also need to look forward and think about the next phase for our charter and for what lies ahead for the school system.
Perfect. Do we want to discuss the calendar?
Okay, so updated calendar. Thank you, Heather, for noticing those errors in there. That was my typo as I was translating this to a little more user-friendly calendar for people. So those should be corrected at this point. Any questions, comments?
Nope, I don't think I have any questions or comments. I know that we had some more, deeper discussion about it in our last, board meeting, so I know this is just to make sure that the corrections have been made.
Okay.
So maybe we will add, the calendar back to consent items for September.
We just approve it.
Oh, we can just approve it? Okay. All right, so, Heather, did you have any other questions, or do you want to take
No,
a
I
second
mean,
to
it's
look at it?
just hard to
I know.
really, I can't digest it, right, because I really did want to take a minute, so I would be more comfortable if we could just do it in the next meeting, not that I think there's anything wrong with it, but I just haven't had a chance to see it since it was if that's not a problem.
We'll move the calendar to, our September meeting. You want to do code of conduct next, Dr. Summer?
Yeah, so Dr. Huddleston and Rodney Thomas did a great job, because right as I was gearing up to do my annual code of conduct review and update is when I moved into the superintendent role. So Lily and Rodney have been gracious enough to take on that part of my previous job. So they did the annual code of conduct update and review. In your board packet, there was a summary of the changes to the code of conduct. And this was really just to see if you had any questions or anything you wanted to ask about the updated code. I will share Rodney is going to be the main contact for code of conduct and processing. So the principals, as they need someone or a partner to ask about issues with the code or discipline issues, they will be reaching out to Mr. Thomas. He has taken on that role. So the big change was really combining rules 4 and 5. Really, they were the same. One was private property, one was school property. They really were the same. So we just combined those to make the code a little more succinct. I should say they added those, combined those to make it a little more succinct. They did add a section on student searches, which was lacking. They also, on the public website, updated the rule matrix and included that so people could see exactly where the code, where the rules line up for different levels of outcomes. And if you have any questions, I know Rodney is here to answer any questions you have.
I have a comment and a couple of questions.
Sure.
So my comment is that y'all did a really good job. I went through and looked at the you had it, you made a lot of good clarifying edits, so I appreciate noticing it's evolving and getting better. So thank you for taking a thorough look at it. I wanted to note that we have corrected the error that we had that previously we had asserted jurisdiction over off-campus activities incorrectly. We should not have done that to begin with. Corrected now to be consistent with state law. So appreciate that correction. And I had one, and this is just kind of a random thought. I didn't study this just all that carefully, but one that caught my eye, which was not a change, it was always in there, that we list an offense called trespass against like school technology, something like that. And we call it a trespass if someone uses a school device for something other than school work. So, for instance, if I get my school laptop and play Minesweeper, which my kids tell me nobody even knows what that is anymore, but that we define it as a trespass, which I think is kind of ridiculous. And it seems to me that it's the kind of thing that when we worry about discretion and the enforcement of vague laws, it's kind of like a squatter law that you're only going to enforce against people you want to come down heavy on. And to have an offense where it's, you know, anytime you use your school-issued device for something other than strictly school work, it's a trespass, is going to invite, I think, piling on when what people are doing are innocent, but they're not school-related. And, you know, we're not going to expect to enforce that against most people. It's only going to be enforced against people we don't like for some reason. I mean, that's what happens when you have vague, overbroad laws. I just noted that and wondered about it.
So yeah, 4C is computer trespass, and the rules under it, there's 3 rules and then another, more like I think tease out what that means for computer trespass. I'm not sure where we came up with the code name, like that name, computer trespass, if that came from state regulation or, you know, kind of an old carryover.
I didn't think this hard about it. I just thought I would mention it because it seems silly and it seems like the kind of code that can lead to inequitable outcomes because it invites people to apply it with bias because you only apply it when you want to apply it, and you're not gonna discipline the kid in order. And we even had an example at the school where you might remember a while back one teacher there's a big brouhaha. And one of the things that came up is this teacher might have been using the school-issued device while at home to browse the internet, and that was listed as a great offense against the school because the device should only have been used for schoolwork. Well, that's silly. I mean, it's a device, you can look at the internet. And so it's really, I think, a pretty good example where it might be against the agreement, but it's meaningless. And there's danger in putting that kind of thing in the code of conduct. If you're saying that using the school device to do wrong things, that's different. But if you're just saying, I've used my school device for something other than schoolwork, it's kind of silly.
I think it's to discourage, I mean, you know, the students have access to so much out there, as we all know as parents. I assume it was to discourage students from going on websites when they're at home, when they don't have the blocker like we do at school, to not be using their school device for those other things. And
that's the intent. I'd think differently about it, but that's not what it says. What it says is much broader than that. That's kind of my point.
Maybe they could be more specific.
And 4CV seems to be much more specific in, you know, attempting to delete, obstruct, interrupt, alter, damage. So that seems to be really what that encompasses.
Right.
But the 4CA is very, just kind of broad and can be very,
I really didn't mean to make too much of it.
Understood. Discussion item, we're just discussing. All right.
Any questions or things for Rodney? I want to thank Lily and Rodney again. They did a great job. They leaned in and really lifted this up and did a great job with stakeholder input as well. They got lots and lots of input on the code, but they really dug through it and read through the input and took that to heart. So they did a wonderful job.
Yeah, I appreciate the work on this. I think it's really critical that we have a code of conduct that we all understand and agree with, so that we can do, make good decisions when we have to face difficult disciplinary situations, and also apply them equitably to our students. So thank you for your work there.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. All right, the next agenda item is, are you supposed to lead us? Sorry. Preliminary enrollment report, and that's really just informational to give you an update on where we are with student enrollment and what our numbers are looking like as they relate to what the projections were, and then kind of where we ended up first day of school, just so you can kind of see our numbers. So that was really just for your information. Any questions or things you had related to that? All right, if not.
Oh, I believe it was Heather who asked the question the last time when we got more of the final numbers of our enrollment, how that would affect our budget.
So we're held harmless this year.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's right.
So this year's hold harmless, but our, whatever counts we have in October will impact our budgeting for next year. But I mean, we had a rush. We had a line out the door on the first day of school.
Oh, really?
So the numbers keep creeping up there. So I think we are definitely seeing a return to more of our anticipated enrollment every day. And we also get another rush after Labor Day. So I think we're going to inch up there. I don't think we'll see a huge impact on our budget.
That's a relief.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's all for discussion items. Yep. Now moving on to future dates. Do we have any, Shana, do we have any, this one, 16. There we go. Oh, we already did that. That's doable, right?
Well, those are the minutes. You wanna, look at the back of the packet.
I didn't see it in the back. Yeah, I didn't see it in the back either. Did I miss it?
It's after the.
It's like the 24th.
There you go.
Oh, here we go. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. All right, so we have our future board meetings. That will be on the Tuesdays, up through at the end of the school year. We're looking at some of our school breaks, our Labor Day. Remember, our fall break will be September 20th, the week of September 20th, so we'll have our board meeting the week before that, and then we'll go into our fall break. We have our professional learning, Thanksgiving break, and holiday breaks, and then some specific school dates to just remember, like DHS 101, College Heights has a virtual curriculum night on the 26th, so that's coming up, and just a few for each school, so just be aware of some of the things going on directly at your school. My question was for any conferences. Do we have any potential virtual conferences coming up? GSBA or NSBA? I know some of them were pushed out because of COVID.
October 22nd, there's a fall workshop,
October 22nd?
and 23rd, there's a fall workshop on poverty and consciousness,
On what now?
poverty.
Oh, October, and that's the GSBA, right?
Yeah.
Fall. Does it say yet whether it's gonna be in person?
It's a hybrid event,
Hybrid, okay.
and then there's another workshop November 16th and 17th.
Mm-hmm.
It's mainly for new board members orientation, and that will be at Berry College. And then there's the GSBA, GSSA pre-conference workshop on December 1st. And then the annual conference would be on December 2nd and 3rd.
And that's the one that's here in Georgia, right, in Atlanta?
Yes,
Mhm.
that will be at the Renaissance Waverly Hotel. You all will be receiving an email tomorrow morning regarding
Perfect. Thank you, Shayna.
I want to get clarification. Our work sessions start at 7?
7. 7 to 9, typically they're a hard stop at 9. All right, any other future dates we need to discuss? All right, so that brings our August 10th meeting, school board meeting adjourned at 8:19. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.